The courtroom was unusually tense that morning. Anyone who'd spent time in Providence Municipal Court knew the rhythm of Judge Frank Caprio's docket: parking tickets, minor violations, the occasional emotional story that would remind everyone why this particular judge had become beloved far beyond Rhode Island. But today felt different. The bailiff had whispered something to the clerk earlier, and there was an electric current of anticipation running through the gallery. More reporters than usual lined the back wall, notebooks ready, cameras positioned at respectful distances. Something was about to happen. Judge Caprio entered from his chambers with his characteristic warm smile, adjusting his reading glasses as he settled into his chair. At 77 years old, he moved with the easy confidence of a man who'd spent decades on the bench, but his eyes still sparkled with that mixture of humor and compassion that had made him a viral sensation. He didn't know about the cameras today. He never played to them. That was part of his magic. Frank Caprio simply was who he was, whether the world was watching or not. "Good morning, everyone," he said, his voice carrying that distinctive Rhode Island accent, warm as Sunday gravy. He glanced at the docket, then looked up at the gallery, noting the unusual attendance. His eyebrows raised slightly, a small smile playing at his lips. "We have quite an audience today. Must be a slow news day in Providence." A ripple of nervous laughter moved through the room. The clerk called the first case. Case number 2019-4782. City of Providence vs. Jennifer Castellano. Failure to pay parking violations, multiple offenses, total amount due, $875. A young woman approached the defendant's podium, and immediately, Judge Caprio could see she was different from his usual morning roster. She wore an expensive tailored suit, navy blue with subtle pinstripes, the kind that cost more than some of his defendants made in a month. Her hair was perfectly styled, her makeup professionally done, and she carried herself with the easy confidence of someone accustomed to getting her way. She placed a designer handbag on the podium. Caprio didn't know brands, but his wife would have recognized it instantly and smiled at him with practiced charm. "Good morning, Your Honor," she said, her voice smooth, almost melodic. "Good morning, Miss Castellano." Caprio looked down at the file before him, his reading glasses sliding slightly down his nose. "I see here we have quite a collection of parking tickets. 15 violations over the past 8 months. He looked up at her, his expression curious rather than judgmental. "That's a lot of parking tickets. What happened here?" Jennifer Castellano's smile never wavered. "Your Honor, I can explain. You see, I work in downtown Providence, and the parking situation is absolutely impossible. I'm often running late to important meetings, and I simply don't have time to circle the block looking for a legal space. I'm sure you understand time is money, and my work is quite demanding." Caprio's expression didn't change, but something flickered in his eyes. In his decades on the bench, he developed an instinct for people, a kind of emotional radar that picked up on things beneath the surface. "I see," he said softly. "And what is it you do, Miss Castellano, that keeps you so busy?" "I'm a consultant for my family's real estate development firm. We're currently working on several major projects in the city." She said it casually, but there was something in her tone, a subtle emphasis on the word family that felt deliberate. "Real estate development. That's good work. Providence needs good development, done right." Caprio's tone was gentle, conversational. He had a way of making the courtroom feel intimate, like a conversation over coffee rather than a legal proceeding. "But you know, Miss Castellano, we have parking regulations for a reason. They're not suggestions. They help the city function, help businesses, help people get where they need to go." "Of course, Your Honor. I completely agree." Jennifer's smile remained fixed, but now she leaned forward slightly, lowering her voice just a touch, as if sharing something confidential. "I should mention my father is Robert Castellano. Perhaps you know him. He's worked with the mayor's office on several initiatives." The courtroom went completely silent. Even the court reporter's fingers paused over her machine for a fraction of a second. Judge Caprio's clerk glanced up sharply, then quickly looked back down at her papers. In the gallery, reporters leaned forward, sensing the shift in atmosphere. Judge Caprio removed his glasses slowly, folding them and placing them on the bench in front of him. He looked at Jennifer Castellano for a long moment, his face unreadable. When he spoke, his voice was still gentle, still warm, but there was something else beneath it now, something that made it clear why Frank Caprio had earned the respect he had over 40 years on the bench. "Miss Castellano," he said quietly, "I know a lot of people in Providence. I've been a part of this community my whole life. I grew up on Federal Hill, worked in my father's fruit market, put myself through law school driving a taxi at night. I've known mayors, councilmen, police chiefs, and yes, I know your father's name." He paused, letting the silence stretch. "But I want to make sure we understand each other. In this courtroom, I don't care who your father is, who your father knows, or what projects your family is working on. In this courtroom, everyone is treated exactly the same. A parking ticket is a parking ticket, whether you drive a 10-year-old Honda or a brand new Mercedes. Do we understand each other?" Jennifer's smile faltered for the first time. A flush crept up her neck. "Of course, Your Honor. I wasn't suggesting." "Good." Caprio's voice remained soft, but firm. "Because the law doesn't care about connections or influence. It cares about fairness. It cares about equality. And in my courtroom, those aren't just words, they're sacred principles." He picked up his glasses again, sliding them back on, and returned his attention to the file. "Now, let's look at these violations. 15 tickets in 8 months. That's almost 2 tickets a month, Miss Castellano. This isn't occasional inconvenience. This is a pattern." Jennifer Castellano stood at the podium, her practiced composure beginning to show cracks. Judge Caprio could see the slight tension in her shoulders, the way her hands gripped the edge of the podium just a little too tightly. He'd seen that look before, the moment when someone realized that their usual advantages weren't going to work here, that they were going to have to engage with the actual situation in front of them. "Let's go through these one by one," Caprio said, his tone shifting back to conversational, giving her a moment to resettle herself. "The first ticket here is from March 15th. You were parked in a handicapped space outside a restaurant on Federal Hill." He looked up at her over his glasses. "Not a fire hydrant, not a loading zone, a handicapped space. That's not about convenience, Miss Castellano. That's about taking something that doesn't belong to you." "I was only there for a few minutes, Your Honor. I was picking up lunch for a client meeting." "A few minutes." Caprio's voice was soft, but there was an edge to it now. "You know, my cousin Anthony, he has MS, multiple sclerosis. Some days, he needs that handicapped space just to get into a restaurant for a meal with his family. Those spaces aren't there for convenience. They're there because someone fought for them, because someone needs them." Jennifer's face reddened further. "I apologize, Your Honor. That was thoughtless of me." "It was." Caprio nodded, accepting the apology but not dismissing the offense. "Let's continue." April 2nd, parked blocking a fire hydrant on Westminster Street. April 19th, parked in a bus stop on Weybosset. May 5th, double parked outside a jewelry store on Wickenden Street. He looked up. "I'm seeing a pattern here, and it's not about convenience. It's about entitlement. Talk to me. Help me understand what's going on." The question hung in the air, that signature Caprio invitation. "Talk to me." Two simple words that had opened doors to hundreds of stories, that had revealed hidden struggles and secret pain, that had turned countless court hearings into moments of genuine human connection. But Jennifer Castellano didn't seem to know what to do with the invitation. "Your Honor, I've already explained. My work schedule is extremely demanding. I'm managing multiple projects, dealing with contractors, meeting with investors, coordinating with city officials. City officials. Caprio's eyebrows raised slightly. He leaned back in his chair, studying her. Your work brings you into contact with city government regularly? Yes, of course. The development projects I mentioned, they require permits, zoning approvals, all kinds of municipal coordination. Something shifted in Caprio's expression, a kind of sadness mixing with disappointment. He'd been a municipal court judge long enough to see this story play out many times, in many variations. People who thought their connections made them special, who believed that rules were for other people. But he also knew that hardness of heart was often a defense mechanism, that arrogance could mask insecurity or pain. Miss Castellano, how old are you? The question seemed to catch her off guard. I'm 28. 28. That's young to be handling major development projects. You must be very capable. For the first time, something genuine flickered across her face, surprise at the compliment, maybe even a touch of pleasure. I work very hard, Your Honor. I can see that. 15 parking tickets in 8 months. You're clearly putting in long hours, running all over the city. Caprio's tone was warmer now, inviting rather than challenging. But I'm curious about something. These tickets, they're all downtown, all during business hours. You don't have a parking arrangement with your office building? We do, but the lot is often full, and sometimes I'm coming from site visits or client meetings, and it's just easier to park wherever I can find a spot. Even if it's illegal. Jennifer paused, then nodded reluctantly. Yes, Your Honor. Caprio was quiet for a moment, tapping his pen against the file. The courtroom had that peculiar stillness that came when everyone was waiting to see which direction things would go. The reporters in the back were scribbling furiously. The clerk kept glancing between the judge and the defendant, her expression unreadable. Miss Castellano, I want to ask you something, and I want you to really think about your answer. Caprio leaned forward, his voice dropping to that intimate tone that made everything else in the room fall away. When you parked in that handicapped space, did it occur to you that someone might need that space? When you blocked that fire hydrant, did you think about what would happen if there was an emergency? When you took up a bus stop, did you wonder about the person who might miss their bus, might be late to work, might lose their job? Jennifer opened her mouth, then closed it. Her face was flushed now, but something was changing in her expression. The defensive armor was cracking, and underneath it, Judge Caprio could see something else, not the entitled daughter of a well-connected family, but a young woman who was perhaps, finally, starting to actually think about what she'd done. No, Your Honor. I didn't think about any of that. Why not? The question was simple, direct, and devastating. Jennifer's eyes dropped to the podium. Her voice, when she spoke, was quieter. Because I was only thinking about myself. About my schedule, my meetings, my convenience. That's honest. Caprio's voice was gentle now, without judgment. I appreciate honesty. It's the first step to doing better. He looked down at the file again, flipping through the pages. But here's what concerns me, Miss Castellano. $875 in fines. For most people who come through this court, that's rent money. That's groceries for a family for 2 months. That's the difference between keeping the lights on and sitting in the dark. But for you. He trailed off, letting her complete the thought. Jennifer's voice was barely audible. For me, it's nothing. Is it? Yes, Your Honor. I can pay this today without any financial hardship. Then why didn't you? The question landed like a stone in still water, sending ripples through the courtroom. Jennifer Castellano looked genuinely confused. Your Honor. Why didn't you pay these tickets when you received them? Judge Caprio's voice remained gentle, but there was a probing quality to it now, the tone of someone who sensed there was more to the story than what appeared on the surface. 15 tickets over 8 months, and not a single one was paid until you were summoned to court. If the money is nothing to you, why let them accumulate? Jennifer's mouth opened, then closed. For the first time since she'd approached the podium, she looked genuinely uncertain. I suppose I just kept putting it off. I was busy, and they weren't a priority, and... They weren't a priority. Caprio nodded slowly. But a court summons was. What changed? Your Honor, I don't understand what you're asking. I'm asking why you're here. Why today? Why did it take a court order to get your attention? He leaned back in his chair, his expression thoughtful. In my experience, Miss Castellano, when someone who can easily afford to pay a fine chooses not to, it's usually not about the money. It's about something else. So I'm asking you, what's the something else? The courtroom was silent. Jennifer stared at the judge, and something was happening in her face, some internal struggle playing out in real time. Her jaw clenched, then released. Her eyes grew bright, and she blinked rapidly, fighting something back. Miss Castellano, Caprio said softly, talk to me. The words seemed to break something loose. Jennifer's hand came up to her face, her fingers pressing against her temple. Your Honor, my father. My father sent me here. Caprio's eyebrows rose. Your father sent you? He found out about the tickets. About the summons. And he was. Her voice caught, and she stopped, visibly trying to compose herself. He was furious. Not about the tickets themselves, but about the embarrassment. About what it would look like if anyone found out. About what his business associates would think, what the mayor's office would think. Now they were getting somewhere. Judge Caprio could feel the shift, could sense they were finally approaching something real beneath all the polished surface. Go on. He said I was careless. That I was jeopardizing everything he'd built. That I needed to come here and make this go away quietly. Jennifer's voice was stronger now, anger mixing with the hurt. He said I should use his name, use his connections, do whatever I needed to do to make sure this didn't become a problem. And that's what you tried to do. It wasn't a question. Yes. The word came out as barely more than a whisper. Yes, Your Honor. That's exactly what I tried to do. Judge Caprio was quiet for a long moment, studying the young woman in front of him. This was the pivot point, the moment where so many of his cases turned. He'd learned long ago that people weren't their worst moments, that beneath bad behavior there was almost always pain, confusion, or fear. The question was whether they could see it themselves, whether they could find their way to something better. Miss Castellano, how long have you been working for your father's company? The question seemed to surprise her. Since I graduated from college. 6 years. And is it what you wanted to do? Her eyes met his, and for the first time, he saw something completely unguarded in her face, a flash of raw, undisguised unhappiness. Does it matter? It matters to me. I want to understand who you are, not just who your father is. Jennifer's composure crumbled. Her hand came up to cover her mouth, and her shoulders shook once, twice. She fought for control, won it back, but barely. When she spoke, her voice was thick with suppressed emotion. No, Your Honor. It's not what I wanted to do. What did you want to do? I wanted to teach. Elementary education. I loved working with kids, I was good at it, I did my student teaching at Hope High School and it was the happiest I'd ever been. The words came faster now, like water breaking through a dam. But my father said teaching was a waste of my education, that I had responsibilities to the family, that he'd paid for my college and I owed him. So I went to work for him, and I've been there ever since, and every day I feel like I'm drowning, like I'm pretending to be someone I'm not, like I'm playing a role in someone else's life. The courtroom was absolutely still. Even the reporters had stopped writing, caught up in the raw honesty of the moment. Judge Caprio's face had softened completely, all the earlier sternness gone, replaced by the deep compassion that had made him beloved by millions. "Miss Castellano, look at me." He waited until her eyes met his. "Do you know why you didn't pay those parking tickets?" She shook her head, tears now running openly down her face, ruining her careful makeup. "Because part of you wanted to get caught. Part of you wanted something to happen that would force a confrontation, that would make your father see you. Even bad attention is attention. Even anger is engagement." His voice was infinitely gentle. "I see this all the time, in different ways. People sabotaging themselves because they don't know how else to ask for help. And I think that's what you've been doing, isn't it?" Jennifer's face crumpled. She nodded, unable to speak. "And when you came here this morning, you tried to do what your father taught you: use connections, use influence, make the problem go away. But that's not what you really wanted, was it? What you really wanted was for someone to see you. To see the person under all the expectations and obligations. To see that you're struggling." "Yes." The word was a sob. "Yes, Your Honor. I'm so tired of pretending. I'm so tired of being who everyone expects me to be." Segment for the courtroom climax or twist. Judge Caprio stood up from his bench, something he rarely did in the middle of a hearing. He walked around to the front, leaning against the edge, his posture informal, almost fatherly. The gesture transformed the courtroom completely, breaking down the formal barrier between judge and defendant, creating space for real human connection. "Miss Castellano, I'm going to tell you something, and I want you to really hear me." His voice carried through the silent courtroom. "You are 28 years old. Your whole life is ahead of you. And I know something about family obligations, about trying to honor your parents while also honoring yourself. My father wanted me to take over his fruit business. Good, honest work. He'd built it with his own hands, came here from Italy with nothing, created something from scratch. And I respected that, I loved him for it. But I wanted to be a lawyer. I wanted to go to law school. And telling him that was one of the hardest things I ever did." Jennifer looked up at him, her tear-stained face focused completely on his words. "You know what he said to me? He said, 'Frank, I didn't come to America so my son could sell fruit. I came to America so my son could be whatever he wants to be. That's what America means.' And he supported me, worked extra hours so I could afford law school, told everyone in the neighborhood about his son the lawyer." Caprio's voice grew thick with emotion. "Your father may not understand this yet, but the greatest gift he can give you is the freedom to be who you really are. And the greatest gift you can give him is the courage to claim that freedom." "But I don't know how," Jennifer whispered. "I don't know how to disappoint him. He's done so much for me, given me so much. Has he given you happiness?" The question was direct, challenging. "Has he given you purpose? Has he given you the space to become the person you were meant to be?" Jennifer was silent, but the answer was written all over her face. "There's a saying in the Jewish tradition, I learned it from my friend Rabbi Greenberg: a father's love doesn't demand that his child be a reflection of himself, but that the child discover his own light. Your father may not know this yet, but by trying to make you into what he wants, he's dimming your light. And that's not love. That's fear." At that moment, there was a commotion at the back of the courtroom. The doors swung open, and a man strode in, mid-50s, expensive suit, the kind of commanding presence that suggested he was used to being the most important person in any room. Several people turned to look, and there was a ripple of recognition. Robert Castellano had arrived. "Your Honor, I apologize for the interruption." His voice was smooth, authoritative, used to being listened to. "I'm Robert Castellano, Jennifer's father. I'm here to address this matter and ensure that we handle it appropriately." Judge Caprio straightened up, his expression becoming unreadable. "Mr. Castellano. Welcome to my courtroom. However, this hearing is already in progress, and your daughter is quite capable of representing herself. Of course, Your Honor, I understand that. I simply wanted to make sure that any misunderstandings could be cleared up. My daughter sometimes speaks without thinking things through completely. Mr. Castellano. Caprio's voice had steel in it now, the gentle judge suddenly replaced by something much firmer. I'm going to stop you right there. Your daughter has been speaking quite clearly, and I've been listening very carefully. Unless she's a minor, which at 28, she certainly is not, then her representation here is her own business, not yours. Robert Castellano's face tightened. Your Honor, I have relationships in this city, I contribute to this community, and I think I deserve some consideration. Mr. Castellano, I'm going to say to you exactly what I said to your daughter earlier. Caprio walked back to his bench, resuming his position, and his voice carried the weight of 4 decades of judicial authority. In this courtroom, I don't care about your relationships, your contributions, or your connections. Everyone who stands before this bench is exactly equal in the eyes of the law. If you can't respect that, you're welcome to wait outside until we're finished here. The courtroom was electric. The reporters were writing furiously now, sensing they were witnessing something extraordinary. Robert Castellano stood frozen, clearly unaccustomed to being spoken to this way, particularly in public. Now, Mr. Castellano, since you're here, I have a question for you. Caprio leaned forward, his eyes fixed on the older man. Did you know that your daughter wanted to be a teacher? The question clearly caught him off guard. What does that have to do with parking violations? Did you know? Caprio's voice was insistent. She mentioned something about it years ago, but that was never a realistic option. She has responsibilities. To you. To the family. To the business we've built. But not to herself. Caprio's voice was quiet now, but it cut through the room like a blade. Mr. Castellano, I see a lot of people in this courtroom. Young people, old people, rich people, poor people. And you know what I've learned? The saddest cases aren't the ones where someone made a mistake or broke a rule. The saddest cases are the ones where someone has stopped being themselves. Where they've lost sight of who they are under all the expectations and obligations. Where they've become so busy living someone else's life that they've forgotten how to live their own. Robert Castellano's face was red now, his jaw clenched. Your Honor, I don't think you understand what's at stake here. I understand perfectly. What's at stake is your daughter's happiness. What's at stake is whether she spends the next 40 years of her life doing something that makes her miserable, all because she's afraid to disappoint you. Caprio's voice rose slightly, passion breaking through his usually measured tone. I'm 77 years old, Mr. Castellano. I've been doing this a long time. And I can tell you with absolute certainty that at the end of your life, you won't be thinking about your development projects or your business relationships. You'll be thinking about whether you were a good father. Whether you loved your daughter enough to let her be who she really is. Whether you had the courage to support her dreams instead of imposing your own. The silence that followed was profound. Robert Castellano stood motionless, and something was shifting in his face, anger giving way to something else, something more complicated. Behind him, Jennifer had started crying again, but these were different tears now. Judge Caprio let the silence stretch, let the weight of the moment settle over the courtroom like snow. He'd learned that sometimes the most important thing he could do was create space for people to feel, to think, to recognize something true in themselves that they'd been avoiding. He looked at Jennifer, then at her father, then back at Jennifer again. Miss Castellano, please approach the bench. His voice was gentle again, inviting rather than commanding. Jennifer walked forward, her father instinctively moving to follow, but Caprio raised a hand. Just Miss Castellano, please. When she stood before him, close enough that the conversation could be more intimate, Caprio spoke softly. I want to make something very clear to you. You came into this courtroom this morning with 15 parking violations, $875 in fines, and you tried to use your father's influence to make the problem go away. That was wrong. Do you understand that? Yes, Your Honor. Her voice was hoarse from crying, but steady. Those parking violations represent real harm. Someone couldn't park in that handicapped space because you were there. Emergency vehicles might have been delayed because you blocked that fire hydrant. People might have missed their bus because you took that bus stop. Actions have consequences, and just because you can afford the fines doesn't mean you didn't hurt people. I understand, Your Honor. I'm sorry. I'm truly, deeply sorry. Caprio nodded slowly. I believe you. And that matters, because sincere remorse is the foundation of change. But I want you to understand something else. He paused, choosing his words carefully. The parking violations are the smallest part of what happened here today. The real violation was against yourself. You've been living a lie, pretending to be someone you're not, and that lie has been poisoning everything: your work, your relationships, your sense of who you are. And today, that poison came to a head. Jennifer nodded, tears streaming down her face again. So here's what I'm going to do. The fines total $875. I'm going to fine you the full amount, because actions have consequences, and you need to understand that your choices affect other people. But I'm also going to give you an option. He leaned forward, his voice dropping even lower. I want you to take that $875 and instead of paying it to the city, I want you to donate it to a Providence Public Schools classroom supply fund. I want you to put it toward crayons and notebooks and books for kids who need them. I want you to remember that teaching is about service, about giving, about helping young people discover who they are. Can you do that? Yes, Your Honor. I can do that. Good. Bring me proof within 30 days, and I'll consider this matter settled. He paused, then added quietly, and Miss Castellano, I want you to promise me something. I want you to promise me that you'll have a real conversation with your father about what you want from your life. Not today, maybe everyone's emotions are too raw right now. But soon. Because you deserve to be happy, and he deserves to know the real you, not the version you've been performing for him. I promise, Your Honor. Judge Caprio straightened up, addressing the full courtroom now. Mr. Castellano, please approach. Robert Castellano walked forward slowly, his earlier bluster completely gone. He looked older somehow, more uncertain. When he stood beside his daughter, Caprio could see the physical resemblance: the same eyes, the same strong jaw. A father and daughter, bound by love and obligation and years of unspoken expectations. Mr. Castellano, I'm not going to lecture you about parenting. You love your daughter, that's obvious. You've provided for her, given her opportunities, built something you hoped she'd be proud to be part of. Those are good things. But love isn't about making someone into what we want them to be. Love is about helping them become what they're meant to be, even if that's not what we had planned. Robert Castellano's voice was rough when he spoke. Your Honor, I built that business for her. Everything I did was for her future. I believe that. But did you ever ask her what future she wanted? Caprio's voice was gentle now, not accusatory. Mr. Castellano, I'm not so different from you. I'm a father too. I have 5 children, and every one of them has surprised me. They didn't all follow the paths I might have chosen for them. But you know what? They're happy. They're fulfilled. They're living authentic lives. And watching them be truly themselves is a greater joy than anything I could have orchestrated for them. Something broke in Robert Castellano's face. His shoulders sagged, and he turned to look at his daughter, really look at her, perhaps for the first time in years. Jenny, I didn't know. I thought I was doing right by you. I know, Dad. Jennifer's voice was barely a whisper. I know. Judge Caprio watched them for a moment, then stood again, coming around the bench one more time. Here's what I want both of you to understand. This courtroom, these parking tickets, this hearing, it's all a gift. It's a chance to stop, to look at each other honestly, to make different choices. Most people don't get that chance. Most people just keep moving forward, year after year, until they wake up one day and realize they've been living the wrong life. But today, right now, you have an opportunity. Don't waste it. He walked to Jennifer first, placing a hand on her shoulder. You be brave. You claim your life. You follow your passion for teaching, and you do it with joy and pride. The world needs good teachers more than it needs another reluctant real estate developer. Then he turned to Robert Castellano, and his voice was firmer. And you be the father she needs, not the father you think you should be. Support her, encourage her, celebrate her choices even if they're not what you planned. Because I promise you, Mr. Castellano, when you're at the end of your life, you won't be thinking about office buildings or development deals. You'll be thinking about whether you were there for your daughter when she needed you. Make sure the answer is yes. Robert Castellano nodded slowly, and his hand reached out, hesitantly, to touch his daughter's arm. It was a small gesture, but it carried the weight of everything unspoken between them. Judge Caprio returned to his bench, his movements carrying the weight of his years, but also a deep satisfaction. This was why he did this work. This was why, at 77, he still came to court every day. Not for the parking tickets or the minor violations, but for these moments when law became mercy, when justice became healing, when a courtroom became a place where people could find their way back to themselves and to each other. This hearing is concluded. Miss Castellano, I'll expect proof of your donation within 30 days. And both of you, he looked at them standing together, father and daughter, both of them vulnerable and uncertain and somehow more real than they'd been when they walked in, both of you, take care of each other. Life is short. Don't waste it on things that don't matter. As they left the courtroom together, walking slowly, Robert Castellano's arm around his daughter's shoulders, the reporters practically rushed the door, eager to tell the story of what they'd just witnessed. But Judge Caprio just sat at his bench, taking off his glasses, rubbing his eyes tiredly but contentedly. The clerk approached him quietly. That was something, Judge. It was, wasn't it? He smiled, that warm, gentle smile that had made him a beloved figure far beyond Providence. You know what I love about this job? Every person who walks through that door is a whole universe of experiences and pain and hope and dreams. And sometimes, if we're patient enough, if we're willing to really listen, we get to glimpse that universe. We get to remind them that they matter, that their choices matter, that their happiness matters. That's not about law. That's about being human. Do you think she'll really do it? Leave her father's business and become a teacher? Caprio was quiet for a moment, thoughtful. I don't know. That's not really the point. The point is that now she knows she can. Now she knows she has choices. And her father knows he needs to let her make them. What happens next is up to them. But at least now they have a chance. He stood up, gathering his papers, preparing for the next case. But before he called it, he looked out at the courtroom, at the people waiting their turn, at the gallery full of reporters and observers and curious citizens who'd heard about this morning's drama. You know, he said, his voice carrying through the room, people sometimes ask me how I can do this work, day after day, hearing about violations and problems and difficulties. They think it must be depressing, dealing with people's mistakes all the time. But I don't see it that way. I see people at crossroads, people facing choices, people being given the opportunity to do better. And if I can help even one person see themselves more clearly, make a different choice, find their way to something truer and better, then that's not depressing. That's sacred work. That's what justice really means, not punishment, but restoration. Not judgment, but mercy. Not pushing people down, but lifting them up. He smiled, that warm, gentle smile that had become famous around the world, that had reminded millions of people that behind every case number was a human story, and that every human story deserved to be heard with compassion. That's what this courtroom is about. Not the law books or the fines or the procedures. It's about recognizing the humanity in every person who stands before this bench. It's about remembering that we're all struggling, we're all trying to do our best, and sometimes we all need someone to look at us and say, "I see you. I understand. Let me help you do better." The courtroom was absolutely silent. Even the hardened court officers, who'd heard hundreds of Judge Caprio's speeches over the years, felt the weight of his words. In the back row, one of the reporters quietly wiped at her eyes, no longer pretending to be objective, no longer maintaining professional distance. "Next case," Judge Caprio said softly, settling back into his chair, putting his glasses back on. And just like that, the extraordinary became ordinary again, the moment of transcendence giving way to the routine business of the court. But everyone in that room knew they'd witnessed something special, something that would stay with them long after they left the courthouse. Outside in the hallway, Jennifer and Robert Castellano stood together, neither quite ready to leave, both processing what had just happened. Robert spoke first, his voice uncertain in a way Jennifer had never heard before. "I didn't know you were unhappy. All these years, I thought I was giving you everything." Jennifer turned to face him, and for the first time in longer than she could remember, she didn't try to hide what she was feeling. "Dad, you gave me a lot. You gave me education, opportunity, security. But you never asked me what I wanted. You never asked me who I wanted to be. I thought I knew. I thought." He trailed off, struggling with something. "My father, he came here with nothing. Worked in factories, saved every penny, died before he ever saw any success. I built that business to honor him, to prove that his sacrifice meant something. And I wanted to pass it on to you, to show him that what he started continued, that it mattered. And it does matter, Dad. But it's your dream, not mine. You're trying to honor Grandpa by making me live your life, and that's not what he would have wanted. He wanted you to have opportunities he didn't have. Shouldn't you want the same for me?" Robert Castellano looked at his daughter, really looked at her, and saw someone he'd somehow stopped seeing years ago. Not the polished professional in the expensive suit, not the competent project manager who kept his business running smoothly, but a young woman who'd been slowly suffocating under the weight of his expectations. "I'm scared," he said suddenly, the words bursting out as if surprised to hear himself saying them. "I'm scared that if you leave the business, I'll lose you. That we won't have anything connecting us anymore. That you'll drift away and I'll just be alone with my buildings and my deals and my empty success." Jennifer's eyes filled with tears again, but she was smiling. "Dad, that's exactly backwards. The business has been keeping us apart. Every day I'm there, I'm pretending, I'm hiding, I'm being someone I'm not. And you can't really know someone who's always pretending. If you let me go, if you let me be who I really am, then maybe for the first time we can actually have a real relationship. Maybe you can know your actual daughter instead of the version I've been performing for you." He was quiet for a long time, and she could see the struggle playing out across his face, love warring with fear, hope wrestling with control. Finally, he spoke, his voice rough with emotion. "Tell me about teaching. Tell me why you love it." And there, in the hallway of Providence Municipal Court, with lawyers and defendants and court officers moving past them, Jennifer Castellano told her father about the day she'd helped a struggling student finally understand a difficult concept, about the joy in that child's face when everything clicked into place. She told him about the creativity of designing lesson plans, about the privilege of being trusted with young minds, about the profound satisfaction of making a real difference in a child's life. She told him about the teacher she'd wanted to become, and as she spoke, her whole face transformed, the tight, controlled mask falling away, revealing someone younger, lighter, more alive. And Robert Castellano listened. Really listened. And as he listened, He began to see what Judge Caprio had seen, what anyone paying attention could have seen, that his daughter was radiant when she talked about teaching, that she came alive in a way she never did when discussing development projects or zoning permits or investor meetings. "I see it," he said finally, interrupting her mid-sentence. "I see why you love it." Jennifer stopped, looking at him hopefully, almost afraid to believe what she was hearing. "I don't understand it," he continued. "I probably never will. To me, teaching seems like such a small thing compared to what we do building things, creating spaces where people live and work and build their lives. But I can see that it's not small to you. I can see that it's everything." "It is, Dad. It really is." He took a deep breath, and when he spoke again, his voice was stronger, more certain. "Then you should do it. You should teach. I don't want you spending another day doing something that makes you miserable just because you think you owe me something. You don't owe me your life, Jenny. You never did." Jennifer threw her arms around her father, and he held her, and they stood there in the courthouse hallway, both of them crying now, both of them grieving the lost years and celebrating the possibility of something better ahead. Around them, life continued, people hurrying to courtrooms, lawyers checking files, the ordinary machinery of justice grinding forward. But for them, time had stopped, and everything was changing. When they finally pulled apart, Jennifer was smiling through her tears. "I don't even know where to start. I'd need to get my teaching certification updated, find a position, figure out. I have a friend on the school board," Robert said, then caught himself, laughing a little. "Old habits. But seriously, I do. Let me at least help you make connections, open some doors. I can't build you a career in teaching the way I could in development, but I can at least introduce you to people who can point you in the right direction." "I'd like that, Dad. I'd really like that." They walked toward the exit together, and as they pushed through the courthouse doors into the bright Providence morning, Robert paused, looking back at the building behind them. "That judge," he said thoughtfully. "Judge Caprio. He's something else, isn't he?" "He is. You know what he did? He could have just fined you, sent us on our way, moved on to the next case. But he saw something. He saw that there was more going on, and he cared enough to dig deeper, to push until we both had to face the truth. That takes wisdom. That takes courage." Jennifer nodded. "He said justice is about restoration, not punishment. About lifting people up, not pushing them down." "He's right. And you know what? I think I've been pushing you down for years, thinking I was lifting you up. Thinking I was building your future when I was really just trying to rebuild my past." Robert's voice was thick with regret. "I'm sorry, Jenny. I'm so sorry." "I know, Dad. I know." They stood there for a moment longer, father and daughter, their relationship fundamentally changed by 1 hour in a municipal courtroom with a 77-year-old judge who'd understood that the law was only a tool, and that the real work was about healing hearts and opening eyes. Inside the courthouse, Judge Frank Caprio had already moved on to his next case, a nervous young man with a citation for an expired registration, his hands shaking as he tried to explain that he'd lost his job and couldn't afford the renewal fee. Caprio listened with the same patience, the same compassion, the same genuine interest in understanding the human being behind the violation. "Tell me what happened," he said gently. "Help me understand." And as the young man began to speak, as his story unfolded, as the courtroom once again became a space for mercy and grace and second chances, the reporters in the gallery prepared to tell another story about the judge from Providence who'd reminded America what justice could look like when it was administered with wisdom, compassion, and love. Because in the end, that was Frank Caprio's gift to the world, not just his decisions or his wit or his viral video moments, but his unwavering belief that every person who stood before his bench was worthy of dignity, worthy of being heard, worthy of a chance to do better. He'd been doing this work for 40 years, and he'd never forgotten that behind every case number was a human heart, and that every human heart deserved to be treated with respect and care. The mayor's daughter had tried to pressure Judge Caprio with her father's connections and influence. What he'd done next hadn't stunned America because it was cruel or harsh or dramatic. It had stunned America because it was kind. Because he'd seen past the entitlement and the privilege to the struggling young woman underneath. Because he'd recognized that sometimes justice means holding people accountable while also helping them find their way home to themselves. And in a world that often seemed harsh and divided and lacking in compassion, that simple act of seeing people as they truly were and loving them anyway was perhaps the most radical thing of all.